right, back on Play Florida with Toy Lei, writer, director, filmmaker of Moon. Uh, Toy, thanks for being here.
Oh man, thanks for having us.
It's a real pleasure always to speak to you. Toy, this is a little bit of a departure from at least your last film. It's not a fight film. It is a really strong exploration into major life themes of death, trust, faith, blame, and deals with suicide and feelings of failure, and all that stuff all of us can relate to at one point or another in our lives. What was the inspiration for the story?
Yeah, you're right. It's not what I normally make, which is what surprised a lot of people, but it was actually made during a time that was unusual in our history. Um, so the story is that I actually started off writing the script like 10 years ago. Didn't know how to finish it. I just had some nice imagery and stuff like that. As you can it, the name of the film is Moon, and parts of it take place on the moon. So I had this nice moon imagery on there, right? And that's what I wrote. And I couldn't finish it. And then along comes COVID and severe lockdown. And then out of the severe lockdown comes all this civil unrest, George Floyd, the whole thing. And by the way, the whole the riots actually started right outside my building. Like the very first riot anywhere started right outside my building. And so I was in the middle of it, and you know eh, we're dealing with a president who's talking about his big red button, and wanting to push it, and just antagonizing every world leader. uh and then COVID happens, and then George Floyd's happening, and people are burning down the streets. And it just got me to a place where it was just like this. A lot of the emotional stuff just started coming out, just because it was around me all the time, and that's where my head and heart was there. And right then, I somehow refound the file because I had to offload a bunch of things on my hard drive, and I opened it, and I was like, oh, I know exactly how to finish it, and then just just pooped out on
Hmm,
its own, literally
nice.
in like 10 minutes.
Uh,
So I think these are things that, we all as humans go through: the blame, the guilt, the shame, if you listen to Brene Brown, she talks about guilt and shame as just like the things that just wear us down as humans and just stay, resident in us and make us make bad decisions. Um, without if you don't deal with it, I mean, guilt and shame have a place in our lives, but you have to learn how to you have to not learn, but you have to deal with it. That's what it's there for, so that you can progress and have the life that you really want. um and so when you're surrounded by a lot of heavy emotions, it's hard to kind of deal with them all at once, even if they're not generated from you. Like George Floyd and the riots were not generated from me, but it was like this heavy energy that was
yeah.
floating around the city, and everybody could feel it, And then, um, again, that was the midst of a lockdown, of a COVID lockdown, and so you know, there was a lot of uncertainty and whatnot. So
So,
that's how it came about, and that's how come it wasn't a fight film. It was just let's talk about let's just deal with who we are.
that's cool. I mean, it's kind of in a way an inner fight film.
Yeah.
The character is, there's a loved one that dies because of some potential. I mean, the other character thinks, well, if they would have made it on time, that might have been avoided. And you know, that struggle for a human being, there's the loss, but this is kind of double duty because it's the loss that you feel responsible for in some way.
Right.
And
Yeah, right. Because we all say, it's okay if I die, but I don't want to be the cause of someone else's death. Right. You know what I mean? And,
yeah,
or it's okay if I get robbed, but I just don't want to be the cause of someone else getting robbed or whatever it is, whatever it is that, we don't, I think humans are generally good people and they don't want to cause harm on anyone else. Like they'd be happy to take it for themselves, but they don't want to cause harm for anybody else.
and so that kind of the heaviness of that added weight to it, I think is, it's just a really, I think it's extreme dramatification, if that's a word, of dramatization of that feeling of, I wish that this didn't happen. I wish that could have been different.
Yeah.
And everybody's got that, I wish that. And I think the question for you is, in making the movie and in living your life and in dealing with these heavy subjects that you're talking about, you've got the riots, you've got the racism, you've got the extreme aggression, you've got the nuclear threat of annihilation. That's all kind of in the water we're all drinking. I wish that this wasn't happening. What does the film, what what did it open up for you in terms of a window into how, as a human being, do you reconcile yourself to these forces that are out of your control?
That is a great question, Constantine. In the and that is the heart of this film, which is that no matter what happens, look to your connections, look to love. That will give you hope. It's the hope that makes you want to take the next step or live the next day or, you know, uh, go to the next milestone in the journey. Because, yeah, I mean, it was a pretty, I don't know if you guys remember, it was a pretty dark time, and, and you could only hope that the next day it was going to get better, or not maybe the next day when you're right in it and everything's boarded up, but like within the next month that it would get better, or people would come to their senses, or people would band together, and it was actually, I'll tell you something. This is so weird. I'll tell you something. One of the things that came out of the of the pandemic, the lockdown part of the pandemic for me was, I pretty much stayed to myself. I have a dog. I pretty much stayed to myself. But during the lockdown, the only people on, because stuff, and as it turned out, we all started to get to know each other because we would see each other. We wanted human connection because at that point, no one was, everyone was shut in and not connecting. Um, Pod, because we were potting, our dogs are potting together. And as it turned out, we have remained that connection, and even now that the world has opened up, uh, we've maintained that connection, and we've actually, our pod has grown stronger and grown bigger, and they're very, very good friends of mine. So it's even in the darkest moments, these wonderful little things happen, and I really love my little, now my large dog pod, and they give me a lot of just kind of good laughs and good times, beers and barbecue, and just a lot of relief from my daily work, which is can sometimes be a grind, and we don't talk about, like, we don't, because they have their own lives that are nothing to do with the industry or training or the stuff I normally talk about. And it's just nice.
It reminds me of something I heard recently. It is that light exists because of the darkness and not in spite of it.
That is exactly true. It is exactly true.
And listening to you speak, there is that layer of hope I don't think that hope can exist without the undercurrent of faith. And so, how do you see faith being played out through the context of the exploration of the movie, of the work of art that you created?
Um, well, I don't want to be too spoilerish. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but I don't want to be too spoilerish about the film. I don't want to ruin it for anyone who's hasn't seen it. But there is a magic, and I say this out loud. I mean, this is public, but there, there's a magical realism piece. And there is a kind of a thing where when you do magical realism, it's kind of like, well, is this real or is this something made up? Like when you watch Tolkien, that's made up. Lord of the Rings is made up, but you love it, right? That's why, and that's called a fantasy because that's not like a fantasy genre because that's not doesn't exist that we know of in our world. But magical realism is like, um, it might be real, it might be magic, but so I think it's up to the viewer whether or not they want to have faith that this is something that could possibly be real or not. you know that's on your own faith. And yes, it is faith. And by the way, I mean, uh there once was a time where people didn't know oxygen existed, and then you said, well, I can't see it, so it doesn't exist. And it's like, well, you're breathing. What are you breathing?
Can I take a
um
stab
yeah, yeah.
at answering your question or my
Yeah.
question for you
Yes,
myself?
yes, okay,
Okay.
I'd love to hear you. You said
Yeah, yeah, because it's really the best person to talk to is yourself, right? When I asked you the question, it came to me instantly, and it probably came to me instantly right after what you've been saying, which is, you know, what happened during COVID for you is you bonded with this dog pod, and the character in the movie lives out her hope through her loved one's support, you know. So it's that human connection that she believes in. She believes in him and what he's saying, you know. So that was
that
interesting to
is
me.
absolutely true.
Cool.
That is
Cool.
absolutely
Thanks.
true. And I think that you could, you know, live in your own little bubble and still understand love, but you understand it more greatly in relation to other people and other things. Like if you're a botanist, you would love your plants. If you're an animal person, which I am, clearly I have a dog. You love your dog, and I understand the world better through my animals. Or through my family, or through my friends and whatnot. Uh, and I think that's what love is that binding and that compassion and that caring and want that selflessness that you want to want better for others than for yourself.
Yeah, Toy, it really opened up my eyes. I've been doing a lot of yoga, and in yoga, it always, you know, a fundamental precept is that the Maya. So Maya is illusion, and the illusion of the duality, and that underneath that relative reality, there's a greater relative, unrelative reality, which is the unity, the one. And so, I think somewhere there's always been a question, well, why bother with dualism? And I think you just answered it. You Toy, last question. How have you been changed as a person after making Moon? And you just disappeared. You
Oh
just
my
disappeared.
lord! It's because I'm like, first of all, I mean, I've learned a lot as a filmmaker doing Moon. I mean, from a
Yeah. Talk to
professional
us.
standpoint,
Yep. Yep.
that's just kind of par for the course. I should hope that every artist learns from every piece of work that they do, and or the studies that they've done to lead up to the work. But uh so Moon, like, when you watch it and you watch the magical realism, I mean, I constantly live in a state of magical realism, and I didn't and this is kind of like Toy's world made manifest. I'm just very proud that it comes across. Like, I feel like the story comes across. I feel like the world comes across. I feel like the concepts come across. And and um so if it's changed anything, it's in me, it's just more about my own self-confidence as a person. I mean, there were times when, I mean, that I was crying in the corner because I'm like, how am I going to get this movie done? I mean, every filmmaker goes through that. That's not new news, but I
But that's
definitely.
heavy. That's a heavy experience, you
Yeah,
know, for
yeah,
one to go through.
yeah, because it's not just about the professionalism of how I'm going to get it done. It's about, like, whether or not you have faith in yourself that it's
Yeah.
going to get done. Where is that hope coming from? You do have to reach out to people. Like, I had to be a better person in order to make this work. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
really had to be a better person. I had to learn how to be more patient, be more of service to people that I normally am. Normally I'm just sitting in my house and just, like, doing my own stuff, blah 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 on the computer like a little mole. And now I have, and with Moon, it was so extravagant. I mean, because if you look at the production value, it's so extravagant. I couldn't do it all myself, and I had to get outside of myself to be of service to people so that they could help. I had to learn how to receive. I'm not very good at receiving help and receiving kindness. So I had to learn how to do that. And that's just and I'm so much of a better person for it. I really thank the universe for that, like, or thank myself, or I don't know who to thank, but I just thank the
All the
universe
above.
for it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
all the same.
yeah.
I think you mentioned an interesting phrase or an interesting idea, and I think it's very true. And I'd like to understand it a little bit better. You there's this, like, dichotomy of asking for help, and I know the challenge in asking for help and receiving help, and then there's you had to be of service to the people helping you. So can you help me understand that a little better?
Yeah, okay. So I have this theory, because, like, I have this theory, and I might be completely wrong, but I feel like a lot of people go into being directors because they want their vision, and it's kind of like a little bit of a power trip. I never try to be a director as in that kind of power trippy way. I always think of I can't even understand why that I don't think that works. I think that as a director, you have to be of service to all of your department heads, you, down to your PA and your crafty person. Because if you aren't of service, you're not helping anybody do their job, and you're not helping anybody grow in their own right. So that they could be, because in the end, if they started off as a level 1 PA, and by the end they become a level 10 PA, only who's benefited? You. They become a better person, and your project has benefited from it. So it benefits you to be of service to other people, to help them be better, to grow, to help them achieve their dreams too. And so that's how I approach directing, is more of being in service, as opposed to, we're gonna do my project.
Yeah, yeah,
Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah. What goes around comes around.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And there's nothing more satisfying than you know on set, or the two times is when you're on set, when you're actually shooting, which is it's a blip compared to the whole lifetime of the project. But when you're shooting, and also the day you have your final cut. I mean, it's not it's not changing. It's like this is it, and this is what we're submitting. Um, and there's just you should look back upon at those moments, and first of all, you're in total ecstasy, relief, whatever it is you're feeling. Usually very positive emotions, but you should look back on that. And if you don't have positive emotions, meaning that shoot that you're you're doing principal photography and it was miserable, or when you finished you are a miserable mess, and you hate the world and you hate what's going on, I think there's something to be said about that, and something that you need to look inwardly of why that wasn't positive for you. Because if it wasn't positive, then don't be a filmmaker, because you could go have those negative emotions in a job that you hate and at least get paid.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Right?
Yeah.
So have you know I'm very proud that when Moon ended, we a lot of us are still friends, and a lot of people got work out of it because they became friends with each other. And that's the kind of environment I try to build, and I feel like the only way you can build that is by being of service.
That's it. Toy Lei, thank you so much. Writer, director, filmmaker.
Thank you, Constantine. Always a pleasure. Always
Always.
a pleasure. Get me to see what comes out of your endeavors.
Thank you. Likewise. Till next time, we'll
Okay.
talk.